Erland of Larvik was a well-known and very talented witcher, considered by some to be the best witcher of the school of the Griffin. Not only was he a talented witcher, but he also founded the school that he would eventually belong to. But every witcher starts his life as a child before they are mutated. Erland, in contrast to some other witchers, actually came from the village of Larvik on the island on Jindarsfjall in Skellige. He was born to a spear maiden of Clan Heime named Vanya, but was received with little love. His father he would never know, but he suspected him to be a Redanian fisher that his mother had forced herself onto. Erland of Larvik would have been abandoned as a baby, if it wasn't for the fact that his mother was a strong believer in Freya, and she feared what the goddess might do to her if she left the child to die. Life on the Skellige Isles around his youth was rough. Witchers were not yet created, and monsters flooded the isles. A night in the woods meant certain death, and one out of the 4 dragars that left the ports would be torn apart by sirens or krakens. Even not keeping in mind the monsters, Erland had a difficult childhood. As his mother saw little use in him, she had him help around her cruise ship, from the moment when he was able to walk. He would do chores for the crewmates, who would in return give him a bit of teaching, the only bit that he ever received. But even though they didn't care for him that much, he received dangerous tasks, which included being the ship's night guard. Which meant that when he spotted a siren or kraken tentacle, he would have to ring the ship's bell and scream as loudly as he could to alarm the crew. And if he failed the task, well, that would just mean they lost a deckhand, and the crew would go on as if nothing ever happened, because no one would miss Erland. At the age of 10, Erland's life changed. For the first time he made port in Nilfgaard. By this time he had become a bit of a troublemaker, having drawn his sword on another deckhand the week before because he insulted him. His mother, after 10 years, still had no love for him, and would almost likely be relieved if he would accidentally get lost. And well, she was in luck. A wealthy-looking mage approached her, asking her to buy her deckhand off her, which she gladly accepted. This sorcerer was the legendary Elzur. In the following weeks, Erland travelled with Elzur as he gathered more children. The intentions of the sorcerer were never made clear. He would ask the 38 children he had collected how their health was, and nothing else. When they asked him why he was taking them, or where, he simply responded by saying that they were to be parts of a revolutionary experiment that adults had proven to be unsatisfactory for. Elzur led the children to the castle of Risberg, where their trials would begin. Erland and the 37 other children were forced to run obstacle courses filled with traps, to dodge pendulums while blindfolded, as well as many other trials. The trials were far from safe, and before the mages at Risberg even started their experiments, 4 had already passed away. The remaining 34 children, which included Erland, began to build a bond. As they were suffering, the fact that they were suffering together made everything a bit more bearable. As the experiments and tests progressed, the children grew, and when Erland reached the age of 11, his eyes started to wander off to an Eternian girl named Yagoda. To the young Erland, this was love. They would sit together on the castle walls before bedtime. They would complain to each other about the mages and their experiments, and not even to mention the awful food. It made Erland and Yagoda feel human again, as while no one cared for them, they cared for each other. The mages eventually moved further in the experiment, and started to feed all the children mushroom brews and alchemical teas. Erland noticed that they became faster and stronger as their bodies became more powerful. But not everything went well. The mages started to serve the children stronger and harsher concoctions, to which most of the girls responded very badly. Many of them became ill, including Jagoda. Erland tried everything he could to take care of her. He would visit her at night and to talk to her, and give her water in hopes that she would get better. Soon, conditions became even worse. The mages would start taking children into the laboratory, one by one. What happened behind closed doors, the children didn't know, but they heard the screams and begging, and saw the mutilated corpses leaving the room, making it clear it was nothing good. Within a week from the start of these drastic experiments, Jagoda, Erland's love, was dead. He took her body and tried to do the best he could to give her mangled remains a proper burial. She was laid to rest in the makeshift graveyard that Erland and the other children had made. Her death made Erland furious. He didn't speak for days. He concentrated all his anger into his tasks. He ran faster, struck harder, as it was his only outlet for his feelings. After a month of children being taken and killed in laboratories, the first success for Alzur had finally arrived, when the first boy survived, with his mind and body intact. They had just created the first Witcher. Within a week of the first success, it was Erland's turn to be mutated. He would go on to say that it was the worst pain he'd ever felt, and the only thing that kept him alive through all that was his hate for the sorcerers that put him through it. Only a handful of the original 38 children survived, but now their training truly began. Specialists from all over the continent were brought in, hunters from Cadwyn, alchemists from Vigvero, and the best of the swordsmen. They would teach the new Witchers everything they would need it out on the path. And while Erland and his fellow Witchers succeeded in those fields, they proved to be lacking in magic. They simply weren't able to cast advanced magic, which resulted in the Brotherhood of Sorcerers forcing them out of Risberg. Alzur and his mentor Cosimo took the children to the abandoned castle in the Kestrel Mountains, named Castle Morcrake. Here, Cosimo would go on to develop Witcher science for them, so they would be able to practice some form of magic at least. Erland was able to find joy in the magic he was taught, which was something he needed after the trials he was put through. But Erland was still an angry boy, forced to become something he didn't want. However, he had a change of heart when he was around 15 to 16 years of age. Not long before, he and the 4 other Witchers would be sent out into the world. There had been a quarrel between the sword trainer and Alzur, which ended up resulting in a new trainer arriving shortly after, a knight-errant with a black griffin on his shield. Talisin Bledin Yorath ap Levelin, the new swordmaster, who they nicknamed the Griffin, changed something in Erland. The knight seemed to believe in something greater, and saw more in the 5 Witchers than just some experiments. He was convinced they would do great things for the world. The words of the instructor turned Erland from an angry young man into one filled with purpose, to protect the people of the continent against the threat of monsters. Erland's first hunt was in southern Cadwyn, where a horde of rot fiends threatened a village. The alderman was confused and concerned when he saw Erland, for no one knew what Witchers were. But because he was so desperate for someone to deal with this threat, he accepted the aid of Erland and would compensate him for his potions and the repair costs of his gear. It was no smooth hunt. Erland killed the rot fiends, yet he still had much to learn, as he almost got caught in a blast of the erupting body of one. But he learned and adapted, slaying other monsters that had terrorized the alderman. He still didn't trust him fully, but the peasants were thankful that they got their problems dealt with. And that's how it went for the Witchers in the early years. Peasants would be grateful and the ones who gave out the contract would be wary of this mysterious figure that kills monsters. Mages, however, quickly took disliking to witchers, as they would do what otherwise mages would do, but cheaper. But the first years of life as a witcher were good for Erland. But not everything was perfect. After a year, priests in the north started to spread venomous tales about witchers, describing them as ungodly witchmen from the mountains. The pleasant moments that the witchers had with the peasants from the first few months became rarer, as the priests spouted more lies. While peasants started to dislike witchers, there was still a group that Erland could connect with, those being the other witchers. They would meet each year in Castle Morcrake, where they would talk about the hunts, then to mourn the fallen witchers during the winter time, before setting out again in spring. Everything went well for Erland and the Order of Witchers, until one of the witchers named Arnegard attacked another witcher over a contract, almost killing him. This attack started a divide between witchers, where Arnegard came sword in hand with some other witchers on his side to the Castle Morcrake, as he knew that other witchers would punish him for his actions. Witcher's blood was spilled in the castle halls, and Erland faced off against Arnegard, whose blows could break his Gwent shields. In the end, Arnegard retreated and left to create his own witcher school, the School of the Bear. In the years after, more witchers left Morcrake, until at one point Erland of Larvik decided he would also leave. He took with him his 13 closest friends, and they settled in Ker-i-Seren, an old fortress on the cliffs of Kovir and Povis. Erland named the school after his mentor, who had made him see purpose in being a witcher, and it became Erland's goal to uphold the traditions that he was taught within the School of the Griffin. He wanted to be an example for the younger witchers of having honor. Together with the head sorcerer they had at the castle, Erland created a new discipline, focused on magic and flexibility. They also made it a point to have the training be a bit more humane. They would guide the children at the castle, they would help them and bury them with dignity when one died. Erland wanted to be sure that no one that trained at the School of the Griffin would have to experience what he did when he became a witcher. As the founder of the school, Erland was the first Grandmaster of the Griffins, yet he would still set out each year to hunt down monsters. During the race wars following the deaths of Lara Doran and Gwegenen of Lot, Erland protected the peasants from specters. During Valka's rebellion, he hunted down necrophages and killed vampires. Yet when a human drew a sword against him, Erland would still kill him, but never for coin. Erland seemed to have been in the habit of not traveling alone, as two individuals named Vas and Nila would often travel with him, or he would come across them near contracts. And yes, just like some other witchers, Erland has given his horse a name, that being Bron. But something had to go wrong at some point. The witchers slew more monsters. Peasants began to forget the threat they once posed. They started to see witchers as mutant freaks and killers, which was largely due to the propaganda made by priests and mages. They were blamed for plagues and their greed. Anti-witcher propaganda was rampant in the 1160s. One by one, the schools of the witchers were attacked. The attack that would eventually take place on the School of the Griffin was done by a few mages, who were jealous of the secrets that the witcher kept in their library. They summoned an avalanche, which destroyed the school, and killed a number of witchers. Erland and a few other witchers managed to escape with their lives. Erland had lived through the entire existence of witchers, as he was among the first to be created. He saw how mages and priests led people to believe that there was no point in having witchers, and he saw the destruction of the school he founded. In the aftermath of destruction, Erland wrote down in his memories, in an icy cave, somewhere not too far from Ker-i-Seren. He hoped that his words might one day help preserve the knowledge of witchers, so that when monsters are returning in large numbers, his journals could be used to help protect the realms even after his death. But here's the thing, he has never been confirmed as dead. His status is unknown, making it possible that during the events in the games, Erland of Larvik, one of the first witchers ever created, one older than Vesemir, actually might still live. And let's just say that meeting one of the first 5 witchers ever created would be something very interesting if it were to ever happen in a future Witcher game. But what do you think of Erland of Larvik? Would you like to see him appear in a future game? I left out some parts of his story, as there are several pages of his adventures hunting monsters, and I feel like that wouldn't fit with the narrative of this video. Till the next video. Bye.